radiologist had seen thousands of X-rays in his career. Broken bones, surgical implants, bullet fragments. But this was different. The metal pieces weren't random. They formed a pattern, and when he realized what that pattern meant, he immediately called the FBI. Welcome to the human stories. Before we begin this incredible medical mystery that turned into a 40-year reunion, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who've been forgotten. St. Mary's Hospital in downtown Seattle was having a typical Tuesday night in the emergency department. The usual mix of cases: a construction worker with a dislocated shoulder, an elderly woman with chest pains, a college student who'd had too much to drink. Nothing out of the ordinary for Dr. Sarah Martinez, who'd been working emergency medicine for 15 years. At 2:17 a.m., the ambulance bay doors slid open with their familiar mechanical whisper. Two paramedics wheeled in a stretcher carrying what appeared to be a homeless man in his 70s. His clothes were worn, his gray beard unkempt, and his weathered hands told the story of a life lived outdoors. "Found him collapsed near Pike Place Market," said paramedic Jake Morrison, handling the transfer report to Dr. Martinez. Unresponsive, no identification, no emergency contacts. Vitals are stable, but he hasn't said a word since we picked him up. Dr. Martinez nodded, pulling on fresh gloves. This scenario played out dozens of times every month in urban hospitals across America. Homeless individuals, often with underlying health conditions, mental illness, or substance abuse issues, would end up in emergency rooms with no way to identify them or contact anyone who might care about their well-being. "Any obvious injuries?" she asked, beginning her preliminary examination. "Nothing visible," replied the second paramedic, Lisa Chen. "No signs of trauma, no obvious bleeding. Could be dehydration, malnutrition, maybe a medical episode." Blood glucose was normal in the field. The man lying on the stretcher looked peaceful despite his circumstances. His breathing was steady, his color was decent, and his pulse was strong. But his eyes remained closed, and he showed no response to verbal stimuli or gentle physical examination. "Let's get a full workup," Dr. Martinez instructed the nursing staff. "Complete blood count, comprehensive metabolic panel, toxicology screen, and let's get a chest X-ray to rule out pneumonia or any other respiratory issues." The patient was assigned to bed 7 in the emergency department, becoming John Doe number 47 for the month of March. The nurses, accustomed to caring for people without names or histories, treated him with the same professional compassion they showed every patient, regardless of their circumstances. 20 minutes later, the blood work came back relatively normal. Slightly dehydrated, mild malnutrition, but nothing that would explain his unconscious state. Dr. Martinez was reviewing the results when the radiology tech, Mike Rodriguez, approached her with the chest X-ray. "Dr. Martinez," Mike said, his voice carrying an unusual tone, "you might want to take a look at this." She clipped the X-ray to the viewing board and immediately saw what had caught Mike's attention. There were multiple small metallic objects visible in the chest cavity, scattered in what initially appeared to be a random pattern throughout the tissue. "Shrapnel?" Dr. Martinez asked, though something about the placement seemed unusual. "That's what I thought at first," Mike replied. "But look at the positioning. I've never seen fragments distributed quite like this." Dr. Martinez studied the image more carefully. The metal pieces were indeed scattered throughout the chest cavity, but as she looked closer, there was something deliberate about their arrangement. They weren't the chaotic scatter pattern typical of explosive shrapnel or accident debris. "I'm going to call Dr. Thompson," she said, referring to the hospital's chief radiologist. "This is unusual enough that I want a second opinion." Dr. James Thompson had been reading X-rays for 25 years. He'd seen everything from swallowed objects to bizarre accident injuries, from surgical complications to wartime trauma in veterans. When Dr. Martinez showed him the film, he was quiet for a long moment. "These aren't shrapnel fragments," he said finally. "The metal density is wrong, and the distribution is too organized." "What do you think they are?" Dr. Thompson pointed to several specific areas on the X-ray. "Look at this cluster here, and this arrangement over here. If I didn't know better, I'd say these were—" He paused, reaching for a magnifying glass to examine the film more closely. As he studied the metallic objects, his expression changed from professional curiosity to something approaching disbelief. "Dr. Martinez," he said slowly, "I think these might be Medal of Honor fragments." "Medal of Honor fragments? What do you mean?" Dr. Thompson set down the magnifying glass and turned to face her. "During World War II in Korea, Some service members who were severely wounded had pieces of their medals literally embedded in their bodies by explosions. The medal composition, the way these pieces are distributed, it's consistent with stories I've heard from other military hospitals. Dr. Martinez felt a chill run down her spine. You're saying this man might be a war hero. I'm saying we need to call the FBI. If these are Medal of Honor fragments, and if this man has been missing for decades, there are people who need to know he's been found. Within an hour, FBI Special Agent David Kim was standing in the emergency department, studying the X-ray films with the same intensity that Dr. Thompson had shown earlier. Agent Kim specialized in cold cases involving missing military personnel, and his expression grew more serious as he examined the evidence. Dr. Thompson is right, Agent Kim confirmed. This pattern is consistent with Medal of Honor fragmentation that we've documented in other cases. The question is, who is this man? Agent Kim spent the next several hours on the phone with various military databases and missing persons units. The challenge was that without fingerprints, the man's hands were too weathered and scarred for clear prints, and without dental records to compare against, identification would be extremely difficult. Meanwhile, back in bed 7, the mysterious patient remained unconscious but stable. The nursing staff had cleaned him up, and beneath the grime and weathered appearance of street life, they could see the bone structure and bearing of someone who had once carried himself with military precision. Nurse Patricia Williams, a veteran herself, noticed details that others had missed. Look at his posture, she pointed out to Dr. Martinez. Even unconscious, he's maintaining perfect spinal alignment. And see these scars on his hands? Those aren't from recent injuries. They're old, probably decades old. As the night progressed, Agent Kim's calls began yielding results. Cross-referencing Medal of Honor recipients who had gone missing or been declared MIA during the Korean War, he found 3 potential matches. But one name kept appearing in multiple databases: Staff Sergeant Robert Chen, Medal of Honor recipient, missing in action since 1952. Staff Sergeant Chen was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously, Agent Kim explained to Dr. Martinez. He was assumed killed in action when his unit was overrun during the Battle of Heartbreak Ridge, but his body was never recovered. And you think this might be him? The timeline fits. The injury pattern fits. And there's something else. Staff Sergeant Chen was reported to have suffered severe chest trauma from a mortar explosion shortly before he went missing. If he survived but was severely injured, these metal fragments could be from his medal being literally blown into his chest cavity. Dr. Martinez looked back at the sleeping figure in bed 7. But how did he end up on the streets of Seattle? Why didn't he come forward? Why didn't he seek help from the VA? That's what we need to find out, Agent Kim replied. But first we need to confirm his identity. The breakthrough came at dawn. Agent Kim had contacted the Army Human Resources Command, and they agreed to rush DNA testing. But while waiting for those results, a crucial piece of evidence emerged from an unexpected source. Nurse Williams, while changing the patient's hospital gown, noticed something that everyone else had missed in the chaos of emergency treatment. Tattooed on the man's left shoulder, faded but still visible, were Chinese characters. "Agent Kim," she called. "You need to see this." The tattoo was old, professionally done, and partially obscured by decades of weathering and sun exposure, but the characters were still readable to someone who knew Chinese. Agent Kim photographed the tattoo and immediately sent the image to a translator at the FBI field office. Within minutes, the response came back: Chen Robei, the Chinese name that appeared in Staff Sergeant Robert Chen's military file. "It's him," Agent Kim said quietly. "This is Staff Sergeant Robert Chen, Medal of Honor recipient, reported killed in action 71 years ago." Word spread quickly through the hospital. The entire emergency department staff gathered around bed 7, looking at the man they now knew was a genuine American hero. The transformation in how they viewed him was immediate and profound. This wasn't just another homeless patient. This was a decorated war veteran who'd been living among them, unrecognized, for decades. But the mystery deepened rather than resolved. How had Staff Sergeant Chen survived the battle that was supposed to have killed him? How had he made it from Korea to Seattle? And most importantly, why had he never revealed his identity or sought help from the countless veteran services that would have honored and cared for him? As if sensing the change in atmosphere around him, Staff Sergeant Chen's eyes began to flutter. After nearly 8 hours of unconsciousness, he was finally waking up. Dr. Martinez approached his bedside carefully. "Sir? Can you hear me? You're insane. Mary's Hospital in Seattle. You're safe. His eyes opened slowly, revealing dark brown eyes that held decades of pain and wisdom. He looked around the room, taking in the medical equipment, the concerned faces, and the presence of Agent Kim, whose FBI credentials were clearly visible. "I know why you're here," he said quietly, his voice hoarse but clear. "You found the medal." Dr. Martinez exchanged glances with Agent Kim. "Sir, we believe you are Staff Sergeant Robert Chen. Is that correct?" A long pause. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. "Sergeant Chen," Agent Kim said gently, "your country has been looking for you for over 70 years. Your family's been looking for you. What happened? How did you survive?" The old man's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to survive," he whispered. "After what I saw, what I did, what I couldn't do, I didn't deserve to come home." Dr. Martinez sat down beside his bed. "Sergeant Chen, can you tell us what happened? Why didn't you come forward?" For the next hour, Staff Sergeant Chen told a story that none of them would ever forget. He had indeed been severely wounded during the Battle of Heartbreak Ridge. The mortar explosion that had embedded his Medal of Honor fragments in his chest had also caused traumatic brain injury and temporary amnesia. He was found by Chinese forces, but instead of being taken prisoner, he was rescued by a Chinese medic who was secretly helping wounded soldiers from both sides. The medic, Dr. Li Wei, had a daughter who reminded him of the American soldier's youth and innocence. "Dr. Li saved my life," Chen continued. "He operated on me in a cave, removed what metal he could, but some pieces were too close to my heart. He said removing them would kill me." For months, Chen recovered in a hidden village, cared for by civilians who risked their lives to help him. But the traumatic brain injury had left him with severe PTSD and fragmented memories. He knew he was American, knew he was a soldier, but couldn't remember his unit, his mission, or how to get home. "By the time my memory started coming back, the war was over," he said. "I tried to make contact with American forces, but I was deep behind enemy lines, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to come back." "Why?" Dr. Martinez asked gently. "Because I remembered what happened before I was wounded. My unit was overrun because I made a decision that got good men killed. The Medal of Honor they gave me, I didn't deserve it. I failed my men." Agent Kim leaned forward. "Sergeant Chen, the Medal of Honor was awarded for your actions in saving 12 wounded soldiers under heavy fire. The battle report states that you single-handedly held off enemy forces while evacuating casualties. You didn't fail anyone. You saved lives." Chen's eyes widened. 12 men. The report said 12? "Yes, sir. 12 American soldiers owe their lives to your actions that day." For the first time in 70 years, Staff Sergeant Robert Chen began to cry. Not tears of sadness, but tears of relief. The guilt that had driven him to live as a nameless wanderer, avoiding recognition and help, began to lift. "I thought I'd gotten them killed," he whispered. "All these years, I thought I was a coward who didn't deserve to come home." Dr. Martinez handed him tissues. "Sergeant Chen, how did you end up in Seattle?" "It took me 3 years to get out of China," he continued. "Dr. Li helped me reach Hong Kong, and from there, I worked on cargo ships. I made it to California in 1956, but I was afraid to contact the military. I thought they'd court-martial me for desertion, or that my family had moved on without me." "Your family never stopped looking," Agent Kim said quietly. "Your younger brother's still alive. He's 86 years old and lives in Portland. He's been searching for you his entire life." The emotional weight of this revelation was overwhelming. Chen had lived for decades believing he was alone in the world, believing he had disgraced himself and his family. The truth, that he was a decorated hero whose family had never given up hope, was almost too much to process. "There's something else," Agent Kim continued. "Your Medal of Honor citation was read at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall dedication in 1982. Your name is on the Korean War Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. You've been honored and remembered, even though you've been living anonymously." Over the following days, as Chen's story spread, the response was overwhelming. Veterans groups, military historians, and Korean War survivors reached out to welcome him back. The Pentagon prepared to reinstate his benefits and provide full medical care. Most importantly, his brother James was contacted and began the journey from Portland to Seattle for a reunion 7 decades in the making. But perhaps the most moving moment came when Dr. Thompson returned with enlarged prints of Chen's X-ray. He showed Chen the pattern of metal fragments in his chest, explaining how they had led to his identification. "Sergeant Chen," Dr. Thompson said, "these fragments aren't just pieces of metal. They're pieces of your Medal of Honor, and they've been inside you, protecting your heart, for 71 years. In a very literal sense, your heroism has been part of you all this time." Chen looked at the X-ray images, seeing for the first time the physical evidence of his sacrifice. The fragments formed an almost star-like pattern around his heart, a permanent reminder of the day he chose to save his fellow soldiers rather than save himself. The reunion with his brother James was covered by local news stations, but the family requested privacy for their first meeting. Through the hospital window, staff members could see two elderly men holding each other and crying, making up for 7 decades of lost time in a few precious hours. Chen chose to remain in Seattle, accepting help from veteran services for the first time in his life. A local VFW post offered him housing, the VA provided comprehensive medical care, and the community that had unknowingly shared space with a hero for years began to understand the gift they had been given. The case of Staff Sergeant Robert Chen changed protocols at St. Mary's Hospital. Dr. Martinez worked with the administration to implement new procedures for identifying potential veterans among homeless patients. They created a liaison program with the VA and veteran service organizations to ensure that no other heroes would go unrecognized. Dr. Thompson framed the original X-ray that had led to Chen's identification. It now hangs in the radiology department with a small plaque that reads, "Sometimes the most important discoveries are hidden in plain sight." Agent Kim continued to work with Chen to document his experiences, creating an oral history that would be preserved in military archives. Chen's story provided valuable insight into the experiences of MIA soldiers and the long-term effects of combat trauma. But perhaps the most significant change was in Chen himself. After 70 years of carrying guilt and living in shadows, he began to accept the truth of his heroism. He started attending VFW meetings, sharing his story with other veterans, and working with PTSD counselors to help current soldiers dealing with similar guilt and trauma. 6 months after his identification, Staff Sergeant Robert Chen was invited to Washington, D.C. for a special ceremony. The Pentagon wanted to honor his service and officially welcome him home. Standing at the Korean War Veterans Memorial, looking at his own name carved in stone, Chen finally understood that his long journey was complete. "For 70 years, I thought I was running from my past," he told the gathered crowd of veterans, officials, and family members. "But I realized now that my past was carrying me forward. Every step I took, even when I was lost, was leading me back to where I belonged." The metal fragments in his chest, pieces of the Medal of Honor that had nearly killed him, had ultimately saved him. They had led to his identification, his reunion with family, and his recognition as the hero he had always been, but never believed himself to be. Today, Staff Sergeant Robert Chen lives in a small apartment in Seattle, surrounded by letters from grateful families of the soldiers he saved, military historians documenting his experiences, and new friends from the veteran community. The metal in his chest remains too dangerous to remove after all these years, but he no longer sees it as a burden. Instead, he understands it as a reminder that heroism isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right despite being afraid. It's about carrying the weight of difficult decisions and continuing to move forward, even when the path is unclear. And sometimes, it's about trusting that the truth will eventually find its way to the surface, even if it takes 70 years and an emergency room X-ray to reveal it. The hospital staff who cared for John Doe number 47 learned an important lesson that night. Every person who comes through their doors has a story, a history, and a dignity that deserves recognition. The homeless man, the mentally ill patient, the unidentified accident victim. Each one could be carrying pieces of heroism that the world has forgotten. Staff Sergeant Robert Chen's story reminds us that heroes don't always wear uniforms or carry visible medals. Sometimes they walk among us quietly, carrying their service in fragments of metal near their hearts, waiting for someone to look closely enough to see who they really are. So now I ask you, have you ever encountered someone whose true story was hidden beneath their appearance? Someone who might have been carrying heroism you couldn't see? Share their memory in the comments, because here at the Human Stories, we believe that everyone deserves to be recognized for who they truly are. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe to help us honor more forgotten heroes. And remember, the next time you see someone society has overlooked, look a little closer. You might be in the presence of greatness.